Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Meter Cute interviews here on Meter and Mayhem. Today, I'll be chatting with Samiri Hernández Hiraldo, an anthropologist and poet who has published not only scholarly work like her 2006 book, Black Puerto Rican Identity and Religious Experience, but also creative work, such as her 2021 book, The Five Legs of the Cat, which received the Juan Felipe Herrera Best Poetry Book Award, One Author, English, 2022. Her latest book, Carnatas, came out in December of 2023. She currently teaches anthropology, religion, and women's studies at Florida A&M University. And she's conducting research on re-Africanization in Puerto Rico and the Puerto Rican diaspora. Are you ready to learn more about her work? Me too. So sit back, relax, and get ready to fall in love.
This first poem is titled A Type of Cinderella Draft. My first experience with Liberación happened in my Baptist church, located in my father's white barrio. A Sunday, a little after 11 a.m., at the skirt of the recently refurbished altar, aproned with roses, lilies, and carnations during an evangelistic campaign. Such liberación was performed by a Pentecostal guest male preacher on a dark-skinned 13-year-old girl named Virgen with pelo malo, bad or kinky hair. She always sat in the back pews, like most members of my church mission, located in my mother's superstitious black barrio. I heard her scream and scream, her hair getting messier and messier. Like a witch, I saw her running away, leaving behind at least her left leather sandal. In a dream, I wish, but oh, how many times I've imagined myself trying to fit even my right foot in her sandal, and I write about it, my foot not fitting. The next poem I'm going to read is dedicated to my father and is titled Papi's Provisions. For once, I heard you sobbing at the thickest edge of La Loma, behind our newly rebuilt cement home, still with bare blocks, dancing, showing off their bottoms. Behind your workshop with many holes because of time, heat, humidity, hurricanes. Almost lost in the gripping thick grass, smelling turpentine, I felt your tears go astray before managing over vines of rosellas, while I stood on top of a pigmented rock, half subterranean, trying on my 2 feet, moving right to left, right to left, to keep my mature deep breathing, red velvety balance. It took me a while, coming back to a you and a me, to the us. You laying it on my aluminum plate once again, a single green banana, because you had to sell each and every one of the others, yellow, purple, blue, orange. And the next poem that I'm going to read is titled Possessions. Down the eroding hill, behind my new cement house, me about 7 years old, maybe 6, spotted first one leg, the rest of her body, not a Mattel, caked with dirt, most of which I immediately removed from her matted hair, her pale face, with the spits of saliva over my flowered shirt. I say, hola, low pitch, hola, higher pitch, gently shook her head to hear the rattle of her eyes, now crossed, barely any eyelashes left. I couldn't recall. Is she been mine? Papi and Mommy? Neither. I tried to remember until I got tired, forgot, or didn't care. I accepted my doll, who I bathed with Belle named Lolly, without one leg, my mind quite imperfect. And for days to come, I played with mine, somebody else's, 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 doll, felizmente. Well, these are poems that represent experiences in my life when I was a child. So now I'm going to read some poems that are about experiences, some of them uh, kind of challenging, and others are beautiful. And this one actually is about, see if I can find it here. This is about the experience of writing poetry and about poems themselves, having life in themselves. Mortals. I'm sorry for the poems of or parts of them I haven't shared up to this apparently accurate moment. But listen to me once again. The second to last gave me the nicest and most extravagant cart ride. Then it left me on the side of the road in the middle of the gloomy and cold night, tentatively waiting for the next bright and wholehearted morning. At the edge of this gripping point, I don't really know where God's gone. The next written with the feet of the Sahelanthropus, an atheistic antonym. And this next poem, it's about tattoos. And it starts with an epigraph that says, but why did the queen specifically state that it was necessary to efface the tattooing on skin of her dead consort in order to assure his place in paradise? For all the effort and inventiveness that the Marquesans lavish on the art of tattoo, they explicitly believe that their gods were not tattooed. In simple, calm, and fresh, palm trees hang as wet as vernacular shells. A tattoo of the exact color of the skin on my unshaved leg reads, Peace long term. This time, quite vividly, my soul rests in a different tourist destino, the small island slowly sinking, still the risk that's worth. I am quiet after all, immersed in the mammoth beauty of the placid coast that welcomes each one of us, completely naked, half completely clothed, tattooed invisibly or not. The next one I'm going to read is dedicated to a friend of mine, Yoko, and she is from Japan, and we became very good friends. And she shared a lot of experiences, or many experiences actually, from Japan and her growing up there. And the title is Grown in Translation. Started to read while hunching as I normally do, the translation of an anthology of Japanese poetry given as a gift. Got caught up in one of the poem's calligraphies. The calligraphies as if about to frame the poem all around, even if the calligraphies end up framing only one side, even if the original poem and its calligraphy impossible to understand. I'm a body lifting up its eyes, even if hard to believe, a stem, each and every one of its petals. And the next one, it's also about um, making poetry, but in a very kind of semiotic way from this experience that is kind of playful. All of us at some crisscross. That's the title of this next poem. And this is from my book. All the poems that I've read so far is from my book, The Five Legs of the Cat. So you probably noticed that all of this poem has to do with feet. I could stomp my feet in black anger, jump out of effervescent joy, stump, stump, jump, jump, stump, jump, anger, joy, split as my two legs in my recent trip to Hong Kong, its rich penthouses, its poor rooftops. Stencil in a large piece of heavy style origami paper, well sustained at either side, I learn by bamboo poles, pointing at the distinguishable main entrance. There are two main human prototypes, as in simple right and wrong. Under one of a kind thick magnolia, I stand for a short while, but I'm definitely not the only turista tourist who slouches first to try to rest. Some of us go ahead and bend our hips and legs. Our knees start such an illusion game, quite strategic, of completely crossing our legs for some audience, including ourselves. We cross them, our legs. We cross them at our own pace, and we cross them, and cross them with the help of our arms, our hands and fingers, our heads like eager poets. This poem is it's really about the infinite and our position in the earth, in space and time, and all of that, and how that is connected to our bodies too, and of course, our feet. Our feet, the clouds, our heads, the roots, the center, the window of the universe, a simple like gum speed dot. Some dare to say, even in plastic, there's pause, a line with some zigzags to the sky, the other line crossing both sides, some parts cut still, whether from the left, from the right, the center line, to below and to in the middle. Four other centers, open-ended, northeast, northwest, southeast, southwest. Forgive me, but we eliminate and eliminate and eliminate even if we rotate the real center or the fake. For example, even when we are sitting, we hug excluding the legs everywhere and forever. Uh, Looking here for these two more points. This is non-patented, and the epigraph is: over the weekend, Rael and his design partner, Virginia Sanfratello, installed their three pink seesaws along the US and Mexico border, ensuring each side had a perfect balance. Children and adults were connected in meaningful ways on both sides. What else should summon us to the art of welcoming life, any life, a su vez, no cualquiera? After an original dilation scene, the next station or case 4016 in a platform, an open earthen mold of a pair of white open legs, its exuded replica on the other side of the wall, one leg behind, one leg in front, innumerable repetitions. And this poem, um, I'm going to read it first in Spanish, and then I'm going to read it in English. Um, and in Spanish is rayuela, which is hopscotch. And this is what it says. ¿Debería la esperanza conducirnos hacia el borde de otro cuadrado ligeramente numerado con tiza de apocado azul? ¿O debería traernos directamente a su centro, incluso con un trozo de roca irregular y áspera, o una bala acabando de aterrizar caliente? And now I'm going to read it in English, and this is dedicated to all the children who has been murdered because of war. Hopscotch, but the title of this I made a change, and it's Hope Scotch. Should hope lead us to the edge of another lightly numbered square in blue chalk? Or should it bring us directly to the center of its very own, even with a piece of an uneven, rough rock? And I said two more points, but I think I can read one more. And the title of this one is The Non-Hysterical Girl Who Cried Other Than Wolf. Crowns aren't for the feet, aren't for the feet. Crowns aren't for the feet, aren't for the feet. Crowns are not for the feet. Crowns aren't for the feet. They aren't for the feet. Crowns are never intended for the feet. They are not, absolutely not for the feet. Crowns aren't for the feet. Really? Blah, blah, blah. But for the shh, playing hide and seek behind a thick bush of Cruz de Malta, its flowers falling over the feet, the flowers so red the feet could burst into more than the molecule of many others. Thank you.
Wow. I always love hearing your work, Samiri. And uh one of the things that really struck me today was how you focus in on an object. So not just sort of broad images, but you'll take a single object like the green banana or the sandal or the doll and just laser focus in on it in your work. And I love that. It has a very
Thank you.
sort of early Charles Simic type thing to it so yeah, it was a real treat to get to hear you.
Thank you. Thank you.
So what is there a particular poet who you love and who has really shaped your way of seeing poetry and writing?
Well, when I was growing up in Puerto Rico, we didn't hear much poetry in school, but we read some. And of course, the poems of Julia de Burgos, which, by the way, she's from my hometown, Carolina. Julia de Burgos, she's known everywhere. And so it inspired me, her poetry inspired me a lot. I like the way that she talks about her body without fear. and she connects her body to everything around her, particularly nature. So that really inspired me about looking at my body and myself internally and connecting that to so many aspects of life. And this book is a reflection of that. So I will say that consciously or unconsciously, um, that influence is very clear in my choice for these poems and the way that I built these poems in this particular book, The Five Legs of the Cat. But then when I came to United States, of course, there's so many poets that have influenced me that I benefited from them in good and not so good ways. Um, but I will say for the most part in good and great ways. So it's hard for me to pinpoint one, but I will say that Kay Ryan, she's a North American poet, and she says so much um, with few words or fewer words, and which is kind of contrary to my style, which I like to use many, many words, although I've learned also to use fewer words too. So I have a mix, but for the most part, like this new collection in Spanish has a lot of words, although I interject with poems that are very short. So, but again, going back to Kay Ryan, I will say that when I read this poem, it just stuck with me in my mind, in my heart, in my whole body. It has been very, very powerful. And so I'm gonna read it if that's okay.
That's great.
And yes, even now I get goosebumps to be honest with you because it's so powerful. It says backward miracle. Every once in a while, we need a backward miracle that will strip language, make it hold for a minute. Just the vessel with the wine in it, a sacramental refusal to multiply, reclaiming the single loaf and the single fish thereby. So it's like going back to the roots of things, what is life? And she does it with few words. And again, I found it very, very powerful in reclaiming ourselves and reclaiming the word. This is what we are, the art of writing and being in communion with others and sharing our perspective with others, but also other perspective. And I see that this is a miracle that to me, just reading this is a miracle, has been a miracle for me as a person, but also as a writer, as a poet. Yes.
Very, very cool. So you said that for some poets had influenced you in not good ways. Are you willing to share any of those? You don't have to speak on that if you don't want to, but um I'm curious to know which ones.
Well, I don't want to say names because perhaps it was in moments that I have to admit that we learn from everything. Yes, but I have to admit that I was perhaps not ready when I was learning about poetry, and it was too difficult for me to grasp. And I got to understand later that poetry is not something for everybody to understand. Even myself, I write and I don't expect people to understand everything. So I appreciate now a poem that even if I cannot understand everything about it, but again, at some moments in my life, I was not sure about that. So it was too much for me to grasp what they were saying. It was too obscure, and I felt like an outsider in that way. And I even thought that I could not get to that. If that was like my goal, I will never attain that goal. But then I learned that that doesn't have to be my goal. So maybe I should say that at some point in my life there was not like the great influence for me in that respect, more in terms of the style. and not being able to get something from that poem.
Oh,
Mhm.
that is a very kind and generous way to put it. I like looking at it that way.
Yes, yes.
Because I think there's definitely um I struggled when I was reading John Ashbery for the first time. Have
Hmm.
you and I feel like I now get the end of Self-Portrait in a Convex Mirror in a completely different way than I did when I was younger. That I'm like, oh,
Hmm.
I get it. We don't see the
Uh,
mechanisms behind it. Ah,
uh,
okay.
Absolutely.
So,
As we grow, then so that maybe in some way that actually inspired us to in some way inspire us, and we didn't acknowledge that or notice that back then, but now perhaps we can see that. So again, um, yeah, perhaps no, I should not say, bad influence or anything.
that's
Yes.
that's fair. That's fair.
Yes.
Well, speaking of growing and changing, I'm interested to know what advice would you give to a younger version of yourself if you could go back in time and impart some
Yes.
wisdom.
Yes. I will say to myself, Samiri, don't be afraid to question internally and externally, and to share that questioning and to explore. Don't be afraid to explore new ways of thinking. That's what I would say. Um, Old Samiri to my young Samiri back in Puerto Rico. So yes, I think that now that has been resolved for the most part, but it took a while. Took a while, Jen. So yes. Mhm.
Uh, would you have any tips on how to get it to take less time, or is it just one of those things that it takes the time it takes?
Yeah, I think that the context in which you grow and also your personality and your priorities at the moment play a role in that quest or questioning what's going on around you, um, why you have to do the things you have to do in a specific way, why you cannot do these things. For example, in my case as a woman, even whistling, I wrote a poem about that, about whistling. It was not seen, that well that girls should whistle. So
Oh,
I like to whistle, you know. And so this is just a very, very small example. There are other examples that are very significant. And so, yes, I will say, um, it's a process, definitely. And I will say that me studying anthropology and also literature, although um, for me to write poetry took also a while because I was putting myself out there, and I couldn't stop doing that actually because that's part of me and that's poetry. It's part of who I am. So putting myself out there was kind of um, difficult too, but and that's part of also questioning because I'm questioning myself why I should not do that. And so why should I not put myself in poetry and make it personal? And I've heard many people saying that, oh, that's kind of self-centeredness and all that. But I will say when you share your own experience, and of course, that's not the only thing that my poetry does. I try to really talk about different experiences around the world because of my anthropological background. But I think when you put yourself out there, people appreciate your honesty, but also your experience might be very similar. And this might sound cliche, but that's the truth. It's like your experience can be very similar to somebody else, or somebody can go through the same process that you're going, and you are kind of walking or holding hands with that person, with that reader, actually, or the listener. So yes, so I feel better about that now. So yes.
Oh. How so when you were doing, and you still do scholarly writing in anthropology,
Yes,
correct?
yes, yes.
Um, do you work the poetry in any way, or does that affect how you do your scholarly writing, or they are they two very separate things for you?
Actually, I'm not the only one anthropology who writes poetry. There were so many um, that wrote poetry. Margaret Mead, Sora Neale Hurston, and many others. Renato Rosaldo. These are famous, anthropologists. And um, I will say, and others, they wrote poetry separately. And I started actually to write poetry in high school, but I was not that serious. But then I wrote more when I was studying anthropology, and without knowing about the other and those famous anthropologists who wrote poetry, and some of them were doing it secretly and not to mix the two. I was doing the same thing. And so, but it wasn't until later when I went to the University of Michigan and I studied, kind of ethnographic poetry and, poetic ethnography, things like that, particularly with Ruth Behar. And she's Cuban American. And she has worked with that for a long time and has legitimized actually, or has helped legitimize that field because it's broader. It's a whole subfield that is called literary anthropology and has different kind of subfields, ethnopoetics, and like I said before, ethnographic poetry, autoethnography, all kinds of things like that. And so I kept them separately for a long time, but then they kind of came together. Of course, that when I've heard about that and like learned that, that kind of like this is possible, but I still was shy to do it because I felt that of course popular anthropologists can do that, they can do whatever and people will accept it, but for me, mixing poetry and anthropology, but later on, I think that I didn't have any other choice. And so I start mixing them in a way, like in my writing, academic writing, I kind of incorporate that a little bit, and in my teaching. And then, of course, my poetry, it's about different experiences around the world, and I'm very intentional about it, and to again to share and to bring knowledge, anthropological knowledge in my poetry, so that when people read my poetry, they can learn about what's going on in Nepal or among with the Yanomami people. So I'm very intentional. Not all poetry is like that, but I will say for the most part, it's very ethnographic in that sense. And so I, it just happened and that's the way it is and that's the way it is. And I'm enjoying it and I become more and more intentional about it. So yes, yeah. Um, but Jen, also in a way, I wanted to keep them separate in a way. I mix them, but at the same time, it's like I want them to also, to some degree, stay separate to save them from what they are. I don't know. It's just like that's the way I see it. So,
Mm.
mhm.
Kind of keeping each one precious in its own
Exactly,
way.
exactly. Yes.
Oh, oh, so cool. I had never heard of um I had never heard about the um the blending of anthropology and poetics, and now I'm gonna go look all that up. Um,
Yes.
that's very cool. Um, another question that I have for you as I was listening, um, because that sounds like you've had quite the change and thinking
Hmm.
about that. Do you think there's any advice that if an earlier version of yourself, if she got in
Hmm.
a time machine somehow and she, showed up at your office hours or something like that, or pops up at your front door, what advice do you think that she would have for you?
As I right now, um, I think keep searching. I think for me, poetry has been also a way of searching and also a way of comforting myself to to vent in a way. When I was pretty sick for 7 years with a disease that the doctors couldn't find what it was, um, I was having many symptoms, and some of them were pretty challenging, and I was in great despair, and because I knew that I have to keep going, I wrote a lot, and so that helped me at that time. So I'm sure that it continues helping me. So again, I will say to myself, if I was younger, keep doing what you're doing, keep searching, and also keep in contact with people, enjoying people's friendships. Try to do the best you can because you don't have all the time in the world. You're getting closer to the end. As they pass, we're closer to the end of our lives. So I will say that to myself right now. Just keep searching, keep enjoying as much as you can. Be content with who you are. Oh, that's very important. I forgot about that. Who you are, and try to keep growing and exploring new things, and commute with people. Commute, and in this transit of life, and also um, have communion with people, uh, be together with people as much as you can, and learn. Yes, I would say that.
Ah,
Mhm.
well, and I think that you've been doing a great job with communing with people because you do the readings and things down at Caliber Tree, where I think you're bringing a lot of great people together to enjoy artwork and music and
Music.
readings together. And I think that you're doing that because I had a great time at the one that I went to, and I had been to one a few years before that too, and
Yes,
just really enjoyed them both. So thank you for all
yes.
the work that you do in
Oh, you are doing
bringing
it too.
poetry to everyone.
You're doing it too. And one thing is, I've been trying to integrate the arts in my classes. And I see that students really enjoy that. Some of them at the beginning, oh, um, wow, we have to do that and this and that. But then actually when they do it, they really enjoyed it. And um, for example, they have to write a poem, they have to do a graphic design, a piece of art, a sculptor, write a playwright. I mentioned a poem, yes, okay, a song, and perform it, or a little bit animated, a little story, and even a set design for something, for a house. Um, and they have to connect that very specifically with what we are talking about in the class. So again, and I think that is very beneficial to them. I think that they get a lot from that experience, and of course, it's not new to many of them, because sometimes I think, oh, I'm telling this, and they come up and they surprise me, and because they are already involved in the arts. So, but they like the fact that they connect that to the academic field, and in a very and then in the context of a classroom. So it's very satisfying to see what the students come up with.
Oh,
So
that's that's excellent. Those were always um kind of my favorite kind of classes when professors would ask you to bring in sort of other modalities and arts and
yes,
things. Those are always my favorite. So I think I would love to have taken one of your classes. So,
Yes, yes.
um,
Thank you. Yeah.
well, we are getting near the end of our time together. So thank you so much for coming in and chatting with me today.
Yes. Thank you for inviting me. It has been a joy, pleasure, and of course with you even more so. Yes.
Wow, what a great interview that was. If I do say so myself. What a fun interview that was. I meant fun. It was great though, right? It was good. We had a good time, and I learned so much about anthropological poetics. I had no idea that existed. So now not only do I have more stuff to put on my TBR list, because I've read a little K Ryan, but like not a lot. Um, the whole concept of anthropological poetics, I had no idea. So now I have this whole field to check out. I'm gonna have to quit my day job just so I can sit around and read. That's okay, right? I don't need to pay my bills. Just kidding, just kidding. But yeah, so I hope that you all had as much fun listening as I had talking during this interview. It was great fun. So a thing that I want to let folks know, which will mean nothing to folks who are listening to this on Spotify, but is more for people who on YouTube. As you can see, Mayhem is not behind me today. Mayhem is off getting framed. So I know Mayhem was already in a frame, but like now Mayhem's going to be in like a beautiful frame, pretty frame. And hopefully a frame that's glass doesn't reflect the light. I don't know. We'll see. But because I also have artwork for the podcast that will be launching in the fall. It will be a short, limited series. I don't have time to do anyway. Sometimes my ideas are bigger than my free time. But I am going to do this other podcast called Granny Love because I have a book coming out in the fall that's poems about my grandmother. And so I'm going to interview people who have Appalachian grandmothers about their grandmothers and have them read one of their poems about their grandmothers. So excited. So I got more artwork because, I will any excuse to buy more art, which is also one of the reasons that I love talking with Samiri, because she also loves art and incorporates it into readings that she hosts. And as you heard her talk in the interview, also into her classes. And it's just, it's awesome. But so anyway, any excuse to commission new art. And so I was getting Granny Love, that's her name. I guess Mayhem's last name is Love then? I don't know. Maybe it's his maternal grandmother. I really don't know. I don't know about these raccoons. I need to develop more backstory for them. But because I was taking that to get framed, I just, went all in. And so anyway, that's all just to say Mayhem's getting framed. That's why he's not behind me right now. But he'll be back. Don't worry. He's coming back. And hopefully you are too. Because I know I am. Thanks for stopping by.